Hi, everyone. On behalf of LAist, welcome to the second installment of our new TV Pilot Club series, this time taking a look back at the first episode of The Fresh Prince of Bel Air. My name's John Cohn. I manage live events for KPCC and LAist. Throughout tonight's event, I invite you to engage with us and your fellow attendees in the chat section. Think casual, think candid, think book club. All of the programming you hear on KPCC and see on LAist is made possible by the generous support of our members. Thank you to all of you. We really couldn't do it without you. If you're not already a member and you're in a position in which you can give, go to support.laist.com/events. I'm hoping that link appears in the chat or on a lower third to make that just a little bit easier. If you do want to stay up to date on our upcoming virtual events, sign up for our events newsletter. You can also hopefully see a link or something in the chat to that as well. Thank you again for joining us. Without further ado, LAist arts and entertainment reporter, Mike Roe.
Oh, it's great to be here with you all this evening. I'm so excited to be back for another TV Pilot Club talking about The Fresh Prince. Tonight, I am joined by a wonderful panel. I'd love to welcome them all here. I have Joe Bernardo, who is a Fresh Prince mega fan. He is also the host of the Filipino American Life podcast. I'm here with Eric Deggans, NPR TV critic, author of Race Baiter, How the Media Wields Dangerous Words to Divide the Nation as well. And Winter Mitchell, who is a writer and content strategist and co-host of the Gen X podcast, Waiting to Exhale. Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for being a part of this. It's great to have you all with us and get a chance to go down memory lane, look back at how The Fresh Prince got started, how it's getting started again with this reboot that's coming up. I just want to know, just to start out, Joe, maybe let's start with you. What made you such a big Fresh Prince fan in the beginning to begin with?
I'm the same age as Ashley Banks or Tatiana Ali. So, I was 10 years old when the pilot came off. And I remember, seeing Will Smith and DJ Jazzy Jeff on the 900 commercial. He had the 900 commercial and he would come out and try to get people to call his line. And then, I watched the pilot. I was a big couch potato back in the day, and I fell in love with it after the pilot. And I think the basketball episode got me. Pass it to Will.
Hooked you on. Yeah, it was so interesting going back and looking at this pilot and seeing. I thought one thing that was really unique is that because of it being the Fresh Prince, like they set up the show and its premise in the theme song, and I feel like that's a unique thing where they don't even bother like showing you like him getting sent there from Philly or anything. It's just starts right off with the theme. Eric, do you have any thoughts on like the theme song or maybe just how things should start out with this pilot?
Well, actually, that is not that revolutionary a thing. That sitcoms like Gilligan's Island, Petticoat Junction, that's a long-standing sort of TV tradition to set up the premise of the sitcom in the theme so that every episode can kind of stand on its own and people don't have to know what the Fresh Prince is all about before they watch an episode from the end of the second season or the beginning of the third season. The theme is going to tell them what the show's about, even if they've never seen the show before and they don't watch the pilot. And so it was kind of like a cheeky way of sort of nodding back to the history of sitcoms, which I thought was kind of interesting. And it was also a way to kind of be a bridge between people who knew Will Smith as the Fresh Prince and knew videos like Parents Just Don't Understand, and maybe had some questions about like what was he going to be like in a sitcom. In that one little theme, you got the transition from recording artist Will Smith to actor Will Smith, which I also thought was just ingenious. And the co-creator of the show and executive producer is Andy Borowitz, who's actually somebody I know. And so you may know his Borowitz report now. He writes all these funny sort of satirical takes on the news.
Yeah, I was just blown away when I realized like he was one of the co-creators of the show.
Exactly. And another producer on the show, Lisa Rosenthal, strangely enough, lives in the area where I live in St. Petersburg, Florida, and has taught at some of the same schools I've taught at. So I've met her and we've talked about these things. So it's, the Fresh Prince has had this sort of weird, I've had this sort of weird association with some of the people who made it. I'm a little bit older than Joe. I'll just say that. So I was a little more established when the show came along. And one of the things I was interested in was what is going to be up with this? Because I was highly skeptical at that point, and probably still remain that way, of big media companies trying to appropriate something like rap. And there was already this sort of tension between the light rappers like Will Smith, who were kind of, they were talking about, parents just don't understand, and
parents meeting
very, very lighthearted. The videos had all these bright colors and stuff, was very lighthearted. And then, before too long, we were gonna start seeing, more harder edged, more from the street kind of hip hop and rap. And so I personally was very skeptical of the show. And I thought it was going to be a lame sitcom where they were trying to make a star out of this guy. But the thing that I noticed when I watched this show back then, and that I realized when I watched it again over the weekend, is you can see him becoming a star. You can see that this guy is just got so much talent, just like bursting out of him, and he's gonna be successful. And so
you can't take your eyes off him in any scene.
For the viewers, you get to experience that. I was saying before we started this thing, I've been covering entertainment for a while, and I'm sure Winter can attest to this. There's something special about being around talented performers when they are having their moment. And Will Smith was really sort of having his first moment in television. It was obvious to everyone in the cast and working on the show, and it became obvious to the viewers very quickly. And then it was something we all got to enjoy, like watching him learn to act, watching him learn to become a TV star, watching him learn how to leverage that tremendous charisma into becoming the Will Smith that we would all eventually come to know and love.
Yeah, it was really interesting, and Will Smith tells the story over the years about how he got the gig because he went to a party with Quincy Jones and ended up getting a chance to audition right there. Quincy just called on him to go in and show people his talent in front of this crowd. And he did it, and people just couldn't resist Will Smith. I think that it was, it sounds like a chance happening, but I think it's one of those things where, well, of course this was going to happen to him at some point because he's just so talented and so, ready for it.
I don't think Quincy would have made that call if he didn't think that Will would crush it when the spotlight fell on him.
Exactly. Winter, one thing I was curious about was I thought that there's so many things that get set up as far as the family dynamics in this pilot episode. There's so many great characters. We really get to know everybody. And I think that's one thing that's really hard to do in the pilot, because you have to take people from, 0 to 60 going in. What stood out to you in how this pilot sort of came together, and what sort of grabbed you?
It's kind of what you just said, Mike. Like, immediately, once you get past the extended credit sequence, you're immediately just burst into the energy of who Will is, beatboxing, on the door to get in. And you see Jeffrey adjusting the pictures inside the house and sort of there's already like a direct, division right there, that this is a house where people, everything has to be perfect when you walk in. And here comes this hurricane just bursting into the door. I can't really say, especially because I was at that time, when did the show begin? 93, 94? 90. Oh my gosh. 1990. Oh yeah. I was 10 years old. So just to have
you gotta stop this. Stop it right now.
I'm 41 now.
In 1990.
It's okay. I'm 41 now. It catches up with you eventually. Okay. No, it's like, just being like a kid and sort of already there was so much, I think, I'll give you a really great anecdote about this. In 1989, I was born and raised in San Francisco, and we had a major earthquake, Loma Prieta, which was a 7.1, 7.2. And that was very disruptive. It was very disruptive to be 9 years old, going to school, and all of a sudden, freeways, fell down that were going to be demolished. Bridge fell down. My sister had a traumatic response to that, and we were displaced from our school. We had to transfer schools. So it was still like one of those situations where I was kind of displaced. And it was the first show that I remember becoming a preteen that I had a connection with, that had an external connection with, right? Like he immediately just exploded. So it was really nice to see someone who also reminded me of my dad. My dad's kind of corny. My dad's, considers himself really hip. But I imagine this young, I imagine this young, fun, Black hip guy, being everyone's friend, making everyone. And you'll notice in the pilot, he finds a way to sort of endear himself, specifically to Ashley, but he finds a way to endear himself into the family. So this looming thought that it's a threat, like he's a hood, is completely banished by the end of the 22 minutes. You're not worried about having this guy in your home on the show. Maybe you're a little bit, Uncle Phil was a little bit skeptical, but in your own home weekly, you felt like you can welcome this young Black man into your home, and he just hit it out of the park.
Yeah, it's interesting too to see how they set him up with all these characters and these dynamics. I thought one thing that I loved is, like you mentioned, him getting ingratiated with Ashley. Is there's so many musical elements in the pilot. You have him beatboxing, you have him teaching Ashley how to rap, you have him, ending by playing piano and showing you there's a little deeper side that you didn't expect coming out of this kid, and it's or even Carlton singing in the end in the shower. So they sort of were like, all right, we have this musician. What do we do with him to make our audience grab him? And I thought that was a really great way of doing it. Also that Uncle Phil dynamic right from the top, setting across like two visions of how to ingratiate yourself with people. It's sort of the trying to become part of the society versus staying true to who you are. Joe,
also, don't forget that that Quincy Jones, of course, was an executive producer, and so was Benny Medina, who was a record executive, and the show was actually based on his life. So, that's another reason why I think maybe you saw a fair amount of music in there. Not just that they had Will Smith, but they had two guys who were heavyweights in the music business who were executive producers.
Yeah, it was great seeing Quincy in that opening too, just getting to drive the taxi. You're like, oh, it's Quincy. It's fun to, I was trying to think about like, if everybody would have caught that at the time or not, but I think that it's a show with so many great talents behind it, and the acting on it is all better than you would expect maybe for sitcoms of the time too. I think especially Uncle Phil really gets to deliver like a pretty powerful scene near the end of this episode. Joe, do you have some thoughts on sort of those dynamics as they were established?
No, I thought it was a great pilot, and looking back and watching it again and knowing kind of the progression of the show, they really established all the relationships with the whole family pretty well. I mean, you talked about Winter, talked about his relationship with Ashley. With Carlton, he becomes kind of the rival, nemesis / friend. With Uncle Phil, he becomes kind of the father figure. Aunt Viv, and I'm sure we're going to talk about Aunt Viv. And
oh yeah.
But Aunt Viv is kind of like the ally to Will. And even Jeffrey and Hillary, their relationship is already set in the pilot, and you see it doesn't veer off too much from what you see in the pilot.
Yeah, it's clear right from the top like what this is going to be, goes on to be. One thing I think that was really interesting is seeing the way that they try to establish that even though this family is maybe wealthy, like they treat Jeffrey well. There is like the dynamic when he goes in, he assumes that Jeffrey's somebody else in the neighborhood, and then has to sort of realize that that's not what's going on here, and that his family is that he didn't know about. There's this whole other level of wealth and success that he didn't know about. I was curious, Winter, do you have certain thoughts on like how that was established and sort of these like different visions of this family and sort of him coming into that world?
I think we'd already seen a little bit of sort of like what it could look like to have an upper crust Black family, and that's what the Cosby Show did for us. And I think seeing that type of wealth really played into sort of like the image that I think a lot of people had in their mind about Bel Air or Beverly Hills or Los Angeles upper crust lifestyle. But the one thing that I really appreciated about going into their family is that, and you kind of see it progress over the series, they relax about the wealth. There's definitely things that they do that is not what in a typical Black family, would be doing. And there's definitely like this notion that Uncle Phil is the main breadwinner. His job is such that he's allowed to afford this lifestyle and sort of take care of everyone. And everybody kind of has lavish, they live lavishly off of that. But the staff having like 4 or 5 maids in the back while they're sitting at dinner, everyone sitting down at the table, having these white guests in their home and having to sort of like acquiesce to their needs, and Will coming in, kind of barging in and just being himself. You can tell that he had never been exposed to that, but he kind of felt like he belonged there no matter what. Like he kind of just wanted to be himself and didn't want to have to sort of change who he was. But then you start seeing that dynamic really play out when we first get him into the school, and you see how he interacts with Carlton, and you see how the approach to education is so specific for Carlton, but Hillary can kind of not be. She's very blasé about it and not that bothered, and sort of how their lifestyle, how each approach their lifestyle with being wealthy is taken differently, especially with Hillary. I always kind of zoned in on because I was closer to Ashley's age, but people would call me Hillary because I wasn't such a young girl, because I sounded like a white girl growing up. So people would just be like, "Oh, you're such a Hillary." And I never felt like any alignment with her. But she really stood out to me because there had never been a young Black woman. I think the girls of the Cosby Show were definitely Afrocentric. I think they were brought up with Afrocentricity because of, Claire and Heathcliff. But I think there was a little bit more flexibility given the Los Angeles lifestyle that Hillary would be hanging out with Charlie Sheen and Demi Moore and Bruce, going to the bonfire for the climate change rally or whatever it is that she was
taking a bus.
Taking a bus. So yes, I just, it's interesting. Like I didn't feel oppressed by it, if that makes sense. It didn't feel
I think that
oppressive.
totally makes sense.
Yeah.
One thing that I love about it too is I think that part of that Will Smith star power is that he can make you feel comfortable in this situation. Like you're like, oh, if Will's cool with it, I'm cool with it. And even it was interesting seeing like the Phil sort of at the party being sad that Ronald Reagan didn't show up, and the neighbors and really trying to be part of the society. I thought it was interesting too, sort of that generational difference that you see when he sort of explains how he heard Malcolm X, he's been there, and how Will wants to be so flippant about everything, but doesn't necessarily have that history to it, and sort of know where he's coming from, and sort of where Phil came from. I was curious, Eric, do you have any thoughts on like that, like sort of the Phil, as in a way it's sort of like the what Will could be with success, and sort of like he's getting put into this situation where he's they want him to acclimate, he's trying to retain who he is. What do you think?
Well, as the resident old head on the panel, what I want to do is sort of set the stage for the context that show was debuting in. So there's this debate going on in Black America about what we would later come to call respectability politics, and this idea that this tension between the idea that the way to get ahead in America is for Black folks to knuckle down and work hard and try to be as perfect as possible, try to be as middle class as possible, and that's how you succeed. And people criticize, for example, the Cosby Show amplifying that message, right?
Mhm.
So along comes
And
this
Bill
show.
Cosby, yeah.
Yeah. And so along comes this show where it is sitting on that tension. And it's about Will Smith coming in, and for much of the pilot, sort of showing, hey, I'm gonna liven up, this tight ass place, and I'm gonna, bring my youthful energy, and I'm gonna bring my sense of fashion, and I'm gonna be fly, and I'm gonna show these rich people how it's done. And then in that scene towards the end, James Avery's character goes, oh, well, hold on, young blood. I knew Malcolm X. I saw Malcolm X speak. I'm not just some tight ass who doesn't know what time it is. And there's a validity to his position where you actually have that discussion about, there's good things about his position, and there's good things about Will's position, and they're both going to learn to meet each other in the middle and kind of take the best things from each person's point of view and come up with a recipe for success and family harmony. That's about the two of them learning from each other. And they're setting up that conflict in the pilot. The pilot is such a well-constructed story. Part of their strategy, obviously, was to surround Will Smith with talented actors because he was a neophyte. So in particular with James Avery, you've got somebody who's got a lot of experience, who's a well-known character actor, and can bring the gravitas and the actual acting when it's needed. And Alfonso Ribeiro is an up-and-coming young actor who's also really good and gets to show what he's capable of over the life of the show. We don't necessarily know how good he is in the pilot. They don't give him much to do, but it's obvious that they were very careful to surround Will Smith with really talented performers so that he could learn how to act, and he wouldn't have to sort of deal with other people not holding up their end of the bargain. Although we're going to get to it, I guess. But also in the story, the story is also set up in a very kind of meticulous and well done kind of way, and it's a great platform. You can tell what kind of stories are going to kick off from this wonderful formula of characters that they get to you, and this show comes along as the Cosby Show is about to go off stage. It debuts in 1990. The Cosby Show ends in 1992. So it is a very natural kind of generational transition from the voice of respectability politics to maybe we can learn something from these young people.
Yeah, it was really interesting. One of the questions we actually just had in our chat room was asking about how the cast was selected and how they all managed to sort of play off each other in such a perfect way together. It was interesting. I know on the reunion special, they were sort of going back and showing some of the original auditions that folks went through. And, I loved, I think, especially the one that stuck with me was seeing Hillary's initial audition and how she just sort of nailed that voice and had that sort of the attitude right from the beginning. And, you could see, like you mentioned, Alfonso Ribeiro just being so talented as Carlton. I love in the pilot, they sort of let you see him as the literal mirror image of Will, because they talk about when they were kids and they were the same. Everybody thought they were just alike, and now Will's taller, but when he looks in the mirror, he sees himself as the Carlton version of himself, and it's it's a nightmare scenario, and you see how maybe he's afraid he's going to end up like that, living with his family, because of this whole respectability thing, but he ends up trying to hold on to who he is through all of that. Folks, if you for the audience, I just wanted to remind everyone, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'd love to hear what you think, what a moment stood out to you, and what you want to really get into from the Fresh Prince pilot and the show as a whole. Joe, we were talking about Aunt Viv, and I was curious if you had any thoughts you want to talk about, looking back at OG, original Aunt Viv, and then we can think about the recasting that happened a few seasons in. I know your reunion special we saw recently had the actress coming back who's been quite publicly holding a vendetta for many years against Will Smith, and they sort of hashed it out. But what do you think, Joe?
I was watching the reunion show. You still don't know exactly what happened, and I'm sure there's like legal issues in terms of they can't talk about it. And I think even Alfonso Ribeiro talked about it in a comedy act or a stand-up comedy
Yeah.
that he did, and he couldn't really talk about it. And so I don't want to conjecture what really happened, but to be honest with you, it's really unfortunate that that happened because, the original Aunt Viv was so much better. No offense to Daphne Reed, but you can't even name one famous or memorable scene with the second Aunt Viv. I don't think compared
Yeah, it was
to the
interesting,
original.
and Will in that reunion special talks about, he takes some responsibility for being, not getting along with the original Aunt Viv and her getting shown the door. Winter, do you want to sort of talk about, I know you really wanted to talk about both Aunt Vivs and what was sort of your thought through all of that?
Again, disruptive. I think when you're a young kid and you just get accustomed to things, the thing about television, I think at that time and what we had been ingratiated to, right? Like there were shows that were on forever and these people were on forever. They didn't really age per se. And if they did age, they went and got a new show. I Love Lucy, the Lucy Show. They were always going to be on forever. And to disrupt a show that to me, I don't know what happened on that set. It must have been mega, but I don't know what happened on that set. I think if to disrupt a well-oiled machine, like the way this show was progressing, to me, it never recovered. It just did not recover as a show. And I recognize that he was really quick I don't think, except for Michael J. Fox, I don't think we've seen a star catapult so quickly from the beginning of a show to, where he eventually starts becoming like the man of the moment. I mean, he became a very big star really very quickly and became the multi-hyphenate, like playing in these different arenas and allowing us to, accept him as a musician, as a rapper. Is that really? I don't know. I know. I know that's what he thought he was. I just thought he was a musical artist. But I think just to see that happen, I think we were reaching a point in television. We just had to accept that these are the things that happen. When I think about Aunt Viv, and also I just want to talk about this specifically, to go from a dark-skinned Black woman to go to this light-skinned Black woman, two different complexions, two different types of hair, and two different approaches to Aunt Viv. I mean, Aunt Viv was no nonsense. She was, supportive of Phil, but she also knew how to be a mother figure to Will and the rest of the family. And she knew how to sort of be the wife that can stand beside him and sort of do the, little dinner type things and be gorgeous and glamorous, but also sort of like stake her place in her beliefs and have her voice be out there. Daphne Reed's Aunt Viv just really to me, just sort of fell back. And unfortunately, that meant that the rest of the cast had to step up and really, that's when it started getting kind of like cartoonish, right? Because then the other characters started to have to take on really silly plot lines just to sort of overcompensate for the fact that there's this glaring missing element of the show that we'd come to love. So for me, it was again disruptive. And I have to be honest, I think I stopped really watching the show after that happened. And then when they brought in the kid, Nikki, no, I don't think that I could. I don't think it started getting really facts of life in the candy store, and I just couldn't deal with it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, classic. A few seasons in, you bring in the kid, you're really stretching for storylines. It was interesting to see how that happened. You're mentioning just sort of Will becoming such a star through this. He goes right from Fresh Prince to doing Independence Day by the end of the series. It's really interesting to see the way that he used some of that power that he had too with getting casting changes, like 3 seasons in too. So it's this is an established character and we are getting rid of her and recasting her on the show. Eric, do you have some thoughts? I know you sort of were talking about this too a little bit.
Yeah,
recasting and yeah.
Well, I mean, the the story that fans had heard for so many years was that there was increasing tension and fights between Janet Hubert and Will Smith in particular, and that it was becoming increasingly difficult to get work done. And at some point, it got to the point where they decided not to renew her contract and bring in someone else to play that role. There's a few, I mean, you know, it seemed to me like the way they talked about it in the reunion special seemed to me sort of calculated to save face for her and to figure out a way to sort of bring everybody together in a way that the fans would appreciate. So I'm not sure I fully believe what either one of them said, but she said, but Janet Hubert said that she was in a difficult marriage, that she was getting abused by her husband, and that was making her withdraw at work. And she never really told the people at work what was going on, so they didn't really understand, and there wasn't a lot of patience for what she was doing. Who knows? But one thing that strikes me is that for a show that was so well crafted when it started, to just replace a major character without any kind of, you know, I mean, it seems like it wouldn't have been that hard, for example, to kill off the character or have some explanation where this one character would leave and another character would come in, but to just pretend that she suddenly morphed between the third season and the fourth season from a thin, you know, dark-skinned woman to a little more robust, you know, light-skinned Black woman just seemed, you're asking a lot from your audience to
I mean, the show.
Now what I do want to point out that this is something that some sitcoms have had to deal with in the past, where the adults performers have to understand that they are not the focus of the show, that the focus of the show is the younger, less experienced performer that the show's built around. And you know, Good Times is sort of like the worst example of that, where it started as a sitcom that was supposed to be focused on Esther Roll's character and John Amos's character, the mother and the father. It was a spinoff of Maude, one of Norman Lear's sitcoms about a family that lived in the projects in Chicago. But Jimmy J.J. Walker's character got so popular that the writers began to focus all the storylines on his character. And the older actors began to resent that, John Amos in particular, which is why he wound up leaving the show. He fought with the writers so much that they didn't renew his contract. And it was another example of, you know,
but they killed James off.
They did kill him off. They did. At least they killed him off. But you know, it was sad because both Esther Rolls and John Amos joined the show and asked the producers, we want to have an intact Black family. We do not want to have a family where the father is absent, or he's not hardworking, or he's not taking care of his family. So it was kind of sad that in the end they wound up with a show. Esther Rolls wound up acting on a show that was exactly like the show she did not want to be involved in. And she probably wouldn't have. And she probably wouldn't have done it if they'd have pitched it to her that way. But what's interesting is that The Fresh Prince was another reenactment of that same power dynamic, where Will Smith was the star of the show, and it was created for him. And the producers of the show were clearly most worried in protecting his brand and having him grow as a young performer. When you're getting to a sitcom and you're in the fourth season already, I mean, that's the show's getting long in the tooth anyway. Right. And so to have something where you do something that major, where you change a character out and you don't explain it, you just have a different actress play her. I just thought, it's just surprised. It was such a ham-handed move, given how brilliantly the show was kind of put together when it first started.
Yeah, you know, the show gets starts breaking the fourth wall a lot in the later seasons. They, you know, they age up the kid and just, like, you know, call it out in the show. They're like, oh, hey, you grew a lot. And it's they definitely are just like, this is the show. We're not gonna try to pretend it's anything else, and it seems like there's not necessarily as much care going into that sort of like grounded feeling that moments in that pilot had. It's something
But
where there's real emotions happening there, and some of that gets lost. Yeah, Winter.
no, I was gonna say, like, just to take it out of the real into the real world for a second, where he was in that moment, the 6 Degrees of Separation had come out, and that could have been like a career killer if it was handled with a different team, maybe with a different, maybe a different type of visibility, maybe if he was a fourth lead on a show and not the center of the show. And that really showed the range, right? So now we're seeing that this young rising star can be kind of goofy and off the wall character, and then turn around and play like a completely just douse himself in this dramatic role going up against really esteemed dramatic actors. That is, and it was there was definitely, I mean, Eric can speak to this. There was awards consideration at the very least. I don't remember if he was nominated or not, but I remember that seemed like okay. well, there should have been, and I think we all think that he did a really fantastic job. And we all know why there was no awards consideration. I think around the same time, Angela Bassett was not nominated for What's Love Got to Do with It, or she did not win. But just to see somebody go from that
actually, the person who got nominated was Stockard Channing.
That's right. I knew there was somebody
got nominated.
Yeah, she got nominated. So just to see, but again, just to be like maybe peripherally in the conversation of that, and to be on a TV show, again, it kind of leads me back to sort of like the Michael J. Fox dynamic, where 3 seasons into Family Ties, he gets Back to the Future. I mean, and from then on, it was just how Hollywood worked. The question is, how long does it stay? How long do you stay on the show? How much, he gave them 4 more years. Will gave them 3 more years, and sort of, just dances into ID4. But again, like where he was at that time, there was not really a bigger television star at this. It was him, Clooney, a few other people, if we're talking about breakouts. It was, you knew that this was going to happen.
And
it was one of those guys, you could see that he was about to blow up, and he goes right from, we have Independence Day right afterwards, right to Men in Black, and becomes even like this whole other level of star after leaving the show. It was interesting to see, that he came from, like, at the beginning, you don't necessarily see that the acting there when he starts out. You see that like that raw energy though that is so watchable and makes you stick around with it, even though he's not necessarily the hard-hitting emotional part of the scenes all the time.
Right.
Joe, I was curious about one thing that I was wondering about was in the chat they were asking about the lingering influences that the show had. There was that viral video a few months ago that was the like dramatic reboot of Fresh Prince, and that was such a hit that they're actually doing an actual dramatic reboot of Fresh Prince now. I was curious if you had any thoughts on either sort of like bringing that back into a new context, or also how you think that the Fresh Prince did sort of affect other shows since then.
I'll let Winter and Eric talk about the reboot, but I'm
For sure.
in terms of the
Joe, you don't want to touch the
reboot. Well, you guys know more.
Tells you everything you need to know about what he thinks about the reboot.
No, I'm excited for the reboot. But in terms of like the lasting effect of Fresh Prince, I mean, you could see, one of the most, watched scenes on YouTube is the father scene. Papa's Got a Brand New Excuse. I mean, it had multi-million hits on YouTube just on that, and just the gear that comes out of the show, the Bel Air Academy jerseys. I know they're selling the Bel Air Academy like jackets, You know, you could just see
It's a good look.
the lasting effect of the show. And you know, to be honest with you, a lot of people my age, like we still quote so many lines from that show. It's just it's amazing.
Yeah, like really, like it sort of worms its way into your brain and sticks
Yeah.
with you like any good sitcom. Someone in the chat was asking about like the costumes for the show. You know, it was very true to like what the Fresh Prince had been wearing in his videos beforehand, and so he sort of took that persona, moved it into the show, and also those outfits from he does the jacket inside out for when he's at the academy. It was really interesting to see like how much they were able to take who Will Smith was, develop this character around him. So often that's usually done historically with like white actors or like stand-ups who are the ones who get these shows built around their personas. But it was really cool seeing that happen for someone who didn't come from that same sort of background. One thing I was curious about with the reboot too is that watching that dramatic reboot, a lot of it was because the ideas that are part of the Fresh Prince, it doesn't seem quite as funny in a modern context about someone getting sent away because of gang violence, and there's different issues that are part of the show that are treated comedically, but the drama version of this was able to go back and say, wait, this is real stuff that's happening here. Winter, do you have any thoughts on either sort of taking some of those real issues into the modern context, or some of the other like serious moments that show hit, like Joe mentioned with the father episode and so much more?
You mean in the reboot or the actual show?
Yeah, just the original show, just like how that was handled there, and then also any thoughts on what that means in the modern context?
One of my favorite episodes is when Carlton is challenged on his blackness. And that episode hit home because I often was challenged the same way, because I talk like a white girl and I like Nirvana. And those were the things that were interesting to me. A lot of things were interesting to me, but in that time, and you're in middle school and in that era, everybody extrapolates the things that seem so white. So I remember thinking to myself, man, not only is Alfonso Ribeiro such a good actor, the way he just pivots and sort of he's dancing, doing the Carlton out there, and then he pivots immediately into this conversation with this brother about don't ever challenge me on who I am. I know who I am. That really was a watershed moment for all us Oreos, because we were all thinking to ourselves, that's right. Like, I know who I am. There is, there's what you see, what you think you know. And those are the moments where I felt like these writers really are touching the void of like where we aren't really represented, where our Blacks aren't represented on television. And I think it also shows how we are able to sort of put together really great programming when the right people are in the room. Now, how many Black writers were in that room? I don't know, but you had a mostly all Black cast. So there was some influence on that conversation. And I really, really appreciated it in that moment. Obviously, the father episode, obviously when his mother comes to visit, like there's certain dynamics that I couldn't directly relate to, but I think we always sort of talk about that scene always sort of gets thrown around on the internet a lot when he cries with Uncle Phil about his father sort of re-abandoning him again. And in that, I will say that Black Twitter, when this first started, kind of, when Uncle Phil passed, when James Avery passed, everyone said that he was like a father figure for them. And I think it's very interesting that millennials specifically say that he was like, millennial Black men say that he was a father figure to them and not Bill Cosby. So already right there, you see the impact, like that dynamic. I don't look at Bill Cosby as a father figure. I just never saw it. I got to be honest. Even as a kid, I just never saw it. But I also think I was raised in a home with both my parents. I have a Black father who was present and available and concerned, and he wasn't sassy like that. So I really think that just sort of those elements of the show shows just to me the impact of the cast being able to influence whoever was in the writer's room.
Yeah, that's one thing they talked in the reunion special about too, is just the idea that this was such a white writer's room, but they gave the cast the freedom to talk about their lines, talk about what they think works, what's authentic, what's not. And so I think that because of that, throughout the show, you end up getting a show that, thanks to the cast influence, like doesn't feel like that. It feels,
Right.
it's still sitcom-y and so forth, but I think that that's a little more authentic than it could have been.
Well, it wasn't. I will point out, it wasn't just that the cast. They had several executive producers who were Black.
Yes.
Not just Benny Madonna and Quincy Jones, but Winifred Hervey, and so they had. It was an odd situation where they were, and Will Smith was an executive producer too. So they had people who had real power in the structure of the show, who were people of color who could call the shots and say, okay, we're doing this or we're not doing that. So that was a big difference. And with Bill Cosby, the Cosby Show hit in the mid 80s. So he wouldn't have been a father figure for millennials just because he peaked as a father figure too long ago. And I think maybe that's one reason. And James Avery's character, and again, the whole setup of the Fresh Prince was about this respected Black man who achieved something, respecting Will Smith's position, respecting growing to respect, this young man that he was charged to take care of. And so he had a respect for where he was coming from that Bill Cosby never showed to the hip hop generation. And I think that's an important reason why millennials may have felt better about James Avery than they did about Bill Cosby.
It's also a thing where the Cosby Show is built around Bill Cosby, while and so it's built around this father figure, while Fresh Prince is built around Will. And I think that it is a lot easier for people who are young at the time to identify and put themselves into Will's role, into his place, and like he's sort of like the audience surrogate who takes you into this world and lets you sort of feel like part of this family, I think, in a way that you don't get with something like The Cosby Show. Like, they talked about seeing this family on The Cosby Show, but also, that show sort of broke the ground and made something like this possible. I was sort of curious about, looking at how the show managed to, make this work with a cast that really presents a lot of different versions of what this family can be, what it means to be Black, what it means to be up and coming with wealth. You talked about Hillary earlier and having, her being a very, unique take on a character that we didn't see a lot on TV before that. Joe, I was sort of curious about looking at those character dynamics. Were there any characters that like you really latched onto as far as like seeing yourself in? Like one thing that I sort of related to what Winter was talking about was that I was a mixed race kid. It was nice seeing folks on TV who were able to like not be the same as every other sitcom and have sort of that feeling of like moving around and having a really interesting, like closer to life than I saw a lot of other places. Any thoughts you have, Joe?
Well, characters, I would say Tatiana Ali, because I had a huge crush on her growing up. No, but
it's interesting seeing with Tatiana, just like her. We talking about, we started with the music too, and then like they brought her as a young singer into the show later, and she ended up having her big hit singles and so forth. And I thought it was really interesting to see like how they would. It became this like multimedia marketing machine between pushing these other folks like out into other media too. Anyway, you were saying, Joe?
No, I was just saying Tatiana because obviously I was the same age, but just the influence that Will had over her. It was kind of the same kind of influence that me as a kid, that this show was having on me. Obviously, I'm not African American, but there are some elements in my community, Asian American community, that resonates with me. For example, like when during the 80s and 90s, when Filipino Americans would get in trouble by gangs or whatever, they would get shipped to the Philippines. They get in trouble and they get shipped to the Philippines. So it's kind of like the Will story a little bit. Obviously, they're not going to something that's affluent, but it's that whole kind of displacement and fish out of water type of scenario. But in general, I think for me, the show had an impact on me, and I would kind of parallel, I guess, Ashley's character with myself.
Yeah, it was interesting too. Like it sort of has this wish fulfillment aspect to it. Also with Will, like he shows up and he's like, "Oh, you got a pool? You got this is the life you're living."
Yeah.
I did not know about this. Apparently, his mom did not really keep him up to date on what's happening with his uncle. But it was, you see that he comes into this world and is able to really like be a part of it. He's a guy who's comfortable anywhere and is able to sort of like make this his thing. What did you sort of like, maybe Winter, do you have any thoughts on like that aspect of it, or like the things in the show that you sort of found yourself in the most?
I think, well, I actually got a chance to work for Benny Medina for a little while. And I always thought that I was like a Will type character because it was the ability to blend in and sort of just flex with any situation and also manipulate the situation, strategize the situation to your benefit. And I learned firsthand how incredibly well Benny Medina is at that. And I used to always like think to myself, yes, my client is J-Lo, but I'm working for Benny Medina, and that's kind of amazing. And I just remember looking at Will and thinking, I will follow this character and I will follow this person playing this character anywhere they're going because they're a good time. Right. And I think the ability to just be jovial in any situation. We were talking yesterday when we were doing our tech check about how my favorite episode is the episode where BBD shows up. And they're filming the video in the house. And I was like, that is exactly something I would do. That is exactly, if I were a little bit older, I would completely manipulate, because I see the strategy and their gears turning. It makes complete sense. This is the perfect place to do it. Put the furniture outside, do the music video in here. Like the strategy around why he did the things he did made complete sense to me. And Benny is an Aquarius and so am I. So like it's an Aquarian strategy to try to see how much can I squeeze out of this one thing to make it benefit me and everybody has a good time. And so that to me is like the Will Smith strategy. Like how many songs in the Wild Wild West soundtrack can I put in that,
I was just trying to get a video.
I also think maybe they had this sense that like they had kind of pulled one over the establishment by even getting the show in the first place. I mean, it's hard to remember. I think it might be hard for younger members in the audience to understand or remember what show business was like back then, what the television industry was like back then. You didn't have nearly as many shows featuring Black characters as we have now. And so to have a show like that, where it wasn't even TV people, it was these insurgent musical people, creating this show. And then, you look at the list of people who guest starred or appeared on the show. I mean,
I was about to say
Tyra Banks and Nia Long and Don Cheadle, Heavy D, Albie Shore, Evander Holyfield, Vivica Fox. I mean, just the list of sort of Black excellence that sort of came through that show, probably almost certainly courtesy of Quincy and Benny, was just amazing. And a sense again that like somebody had kicked the door open a little bit, and so now we're all going to take advantage of that. And that was back at a time, Arsenio Hall's first version of his talk show was on in 89, 90. And, there weren't talk shows that featured performers who were, as we call, like ghetto famous, like Black famous, like Black folks knew them, but white folks didn't. So MC Hammer before You Can't Touch This, Guy, people like performers like that, they couldn't get on late night television, but they could get on Arsenio. And I think the Fresh Prince kind of had a little bit of that ethic where we've kicked open the door a little bit, let's pull everybody in and let's like you said, squeeze as much juice out of the berry as we can.
But
Yeah,
Eric,
it
to
was
that point, sorry, Mike, sorry.
No,
I
go
was
for
just
it.
going to say really quick that it's to that point, like it was Black performers and artists who were, it was the Eddie Murphy, Red Fox, Richard Pryor rule,
Yeah.
where we are, just like you said, the doors open a little, all y'all come in. And it was the same situation on In Living Color. It was the same situation on Martin. It was the same situation on Living Single. So we were seeing like all of these people who were just sort of taking this watershed moment to like bring all of their faves together. And that was so critical, especially to be like a young Black person, to see all these people and know that they had our backs, that it was premium programming. It was just the way we wanted it. And it felt like overnight, it was like, bye, this is canceled. This is a problem. Martin is crazy. He's on Ventura Boulevard. Like it was fractured so quickly. And I really do miss sort of that, that cycle of opening Jet magazine and seeing all this Black programming, and seeing all of these people that I love, that I hear on the radio, read and vibe, and see them on television. And I think sometimes Will is his star power at that time reminds me of Kevin Hart now.
Yeah.
Kevin Hart is like so huge that anything he says yes to is automatically greenlit. It is happening. It is on. And to see like that, do I think Kevin Hart's funny? Sure. But do I think Will Smith was a powerhouse? Yes. And at that time, it was very vital to have a man like that, at the forefront.
Yeah, it was really interesting with one thing I love about the show too is that I feel like you're talking about the guest stars, the way it sort of would pay homage to where it came from too. You had Sherman Helmsley guest star. You had, them showing that they are bringing up both new actors, new stars, as well as sort of paying homage to the past as well. I know we're almost out of time and I have to wrap it up, but I want to make sure that I got a chance to hear any closing thoughts from y'all before we shut this down until next month. Joe, do you want to start us off with anything that I haven't let you get off your heart about your Fresh Prince love just yet?
To be honest with you, I know there's some criticism about the later seasons. I actually really love the later seasons. It was just so wacky, and I know cartoony was a adjective that was used. But I just thought it really demonstrated Will Smith's like comedic chops. Like he really carried the show, particularly in the later seasons, and it was just so hilarious. And
I mean, you can see him like find himself, and he's able to carry the show at that point, and like they are able to like center stuff around him and let him be himself a bit more, and sometimes that pushed it in a crazier direction, but it was Will Smith. And Winter, do you have any other things you want to share with us?
I'm glad that we lived in a time where we had a Will Smith. I'm glad that we have a Will Smith. I watch his social, I'm a digital strategist, so like that's my thing. But I watch his work moving into to social media and trying to sort of build an empire there. And I just think about everything that led up to this, that he has sort of created, he has fostered, he has built, having this multi-hyphenate person be able to open a film, to pick and choose his projects, to do something like Ali, just the way he moves, I think is I appreciate that. I appreciate that as him being an African-American man. I appreciate his level of passion for everything that he brings to the table. And I'm glad that we lived in a world where we had a Fresh Prince of Bel Air, and that it can have all these Norman Learish offshoots and things, going on with it. I welcome a dramatic reboot. Who wouldn't welcome something like that? That show, we love that show. Why wouldn't we want something like that to be successful?
Yeah, I mean, you watch Will, and he's somebody who's so good at so many things that it drives you crazy. Like he's amazing at the social media. He's like, his YouTube's great. He's good at TikTok. He's good at like all of it. And he's also singer, actor, did it all over the years.
But it's funny, Mike, that he becomes like an aspirational figure to everyone in that house.
Yeah,
considering that he was brought there to buckle down and get his head in the books and but he ends up becoming like this aspirational figure, and to a point, not being obnoxious about it. It's just his way, and I always thought that was great.
Yeah, that dynamic gets flipped as the show goes on, and it's less about him fitting with them and them, grabbing onto who he is. Eric, do you have anything else you want to share before we close this out tonight?
When I was thinking about what I was going to say about Prince, I view the show as a bridge in so many ways. It was a bridge between respectability politics of the Cosby generation and the authentic sort of street swagger of the hip hop generation. It was a bridge between Black performers and the mostly white TV industry. It was a bridge between generations of Black people who enjoyed the show for different reasons. And it was a bridge between one style of television and a different style of television that began to emerge as the show began to recede. And so I think that's one reason why the show is so fond for so many people, because they were coming to it at a moment of great transition personally, and at a time when the industry and the country was in great transition. And so it's interesting to view the Fresh Prince as sort of like a bridge show that took us from one type of world and left us in another type of world. And by the way, gave us Will Smith. And when I was watching the show, I was already a journalist covering entertainment. And I wondered what was going to happen to this rap duo that created these cool looking videos, but the entertainment industry didn't seem to know what to do with that. And so to have this show come along and take, the more charismatic one of them and turn him into a megastar was just sort of like, wow, that's probably the best way that story could have ended. And so, there's a lot going on in this little show that could have been kind of shrugged off as like a nonsense sitcom.
And you talked about the way it sort of opened the door, and he brought Jazzy Jeff with him to be on the show and to get thrown out of the house over and over again. And,
something else viewed quite often on YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you all so much for being here tonight. Thank you to Eric Deggans, to Joe Bernardo, to Winter Mitchell, all of you. I really appreciate hearing everything you had to share. Thank you so much to the fans, to the audience tonight that has joined us and shared their questions. If we didn't get to what you asked, please feel free to follow us on social media. Be sure to tweet at us, and we can talk Fresh Prince all month long after this as well. Be sure to come back next month. We're going to be talking The Office and the pilot of The Office on Tuesday, April 13th. So I will see you all then. Until next time, thank you for being there for TV Pilot Club.